Welcome to the International School of Tailoring. My name is Reza and this is your 30-second lesson and you are gonna love this one.
You can already see that the lapel section.
In the previous lesson, we got the undercollar on. It is now time for our sleeves. Some of you love it, some of you hate it, some of you dread it. But rest assured, we're going to set your soul free because today's lesson is all about the fundamentals of sleeves. Now, when it comes to sleeves, there is a lot to cover because we have the cutting aspect and the making aspect. We're not going to cover the cutting aspect yet. We're going to cover the making aspect and everything you need to know about making a pair of sleeves and putting it into a jacket. We're going to deal with rotation. We're going to deal with fullness. We're going to deal with handling of the material. That's going to make it all very complicated to take in at once. So we're going to start with point 0, bottom up, and we're going to add a step to each layer and turn that into a sleeve. From worm to Homo sapien. That's what we're going to do. So first we're going to simplify the sleeve to death. Then we're going to add a step at a time and discuss the purpose of each step. Last but not least, once we're done, I will leave you with a few exercises to really deepen your understanding about all the parts that we're going to go through. You ready? Let's go. Okay, let's begin by simplifying the armhole and the sleeve all the way to 1 pixel. In the simplest form, the armhole is simply a hole in the middle of our material, let's say this square. And the sleeve, the upper part of the sleeve, is simply a circle that is slightly bigger than this armhole. Whenever we place this bigger circle on our armhole, we create an overlap, okay? Because the sleeve is bigger than the armhole and there is an overlap, the shape of these two forms, these two edges, is different. And that difference is because of the size, okay? When we join these two together, we have shape by angle. And shape by angle creates volume on our circle. If our circle was exactly the same size as the hole that we have in the middle of this square, it would simply be a flat surface. Let's see how this looks on our materials. Here we have a square, and in the middle of this square we have a circle, a hole. Onto that hole we sew a circular panel. Because the circle is exactly the same size as the hole, when I join them together, I get a flat surface. No volume is created. Even though when I was joining the two, I had two opposing curves. The armhole was going in one direction, the sleeve was going in the other, and that resulted in this surplus, which you can see as a gather. However, this didn't result in any volume because it was pulled back and folded flat as a round seam. If you're not following along with me, check out lesson 26 on shape by angle and then come back. Now, when I increase the size of my circle and I sew that bigger circle into the armhole, the smaller armhole, the opposing curves that I had originally, which created a gather, can actually stay as opposing curves because I have now enough width to simply roll over the surplus without pulling it flat, which creates this round volume. And if I lift this up, it just looks like the roll of our sleeves. So the shape and the volume that you get on your sleeve head is a result of a difference in the size of your sleeve head and your armhole. It's not you just pushing in fabric and creating fullness. There is a science behind it, which we are going to cover in the cutting aspect later on. But for now, this is what creates our shape. Bigger circle, more surplus, bigger roll. Let's continue. Now we can say that this green circle is the upper part of the sleeve head. But we also have the arm covering, of course, as well. So we could say that that can be simplified in a cylinder. If I would draw a cylinder here, like so, and we would have a seam on the cylinder and we would open that cylinder up, the pattern for that cylinder is going to be a square or a rectangle depending on its width. If we add this circle to the cylinder, we get a one-piece sleeve. So here we have the sleeve head. Here we have the arm, or the cylinder for the arm. And we join the remaining part like so. And that is a one-piece sleeve. These two curves that I just joined are mirror images of the armhole that the sleeve gets sewn into. So this curve will fold back and get sewn in this area of the armhole, okay? It has to have a similar shape. This is more important whenever your armhole changes into a oval shape instead of a circle. Now, whenever we have a one-piece sleeve, we are dealing with two things. The first one is called sleeve depth. It's from the top of the sleeve to the bottom of the sleeve, the bottom part of this circle. So, depth. Sleeve depth is basically armhole depth on the sleeve itself. They are the same thing, more or less. Then we have the second thing, which is on the top quarter of the top sleeve or the sleeve run, and that is called the crown. Sometimes tailors refer to sleeve depth as crown height, but I don't think that's correct because it's confusing. You can have the same sleeve depth with two different crown shapes, so you should refer to it really as crown shape, okay? Now, let's see how all of this works on paper. Here we have three different sleeve patterns, and each one of them has a different sleeve depth. What does sleeve depth do to our sleeve? Well, it's very simple. The lesser depth you have on your sleeve, the more elevation you have sideways on your sleeve. Of course, that sleeve is going to fall down because gravity will pull it down, but it's actually set in like this. The more you increase the depth of the sleeve, the lower and lower and lower that sleeve is going to hang. Let's see this on paper. So here I have my square pattern, which is turned into a cylinder. There is no depth. If I put this against the body here, it's just like a tree. It's like going 90-degree angle, nothing else. Here, I have a little bit more depth on my sleeve, and that brings the arm already lower. And whenever we look at our greatest depth, that sleeve is just hanging down. Now, as I said, we could of course have two different sleeves with the same depth, but a very different crown shape. So here we have two sleeves, same depth, but one of them has a very narrow and pointy crown shape and the other one has a very wide and round. What is the effect of that? Well, we have less material across the width of the sleeve on this narrow one than we have on this one. The effect is of course a pointy sleeve, maybe even tight, and on this one a rounder sleeve and maybe a little bit fuller. Now, our one-piece sleeve is a sleeve with a straight cylinder. But our arm is not a straight cylinder, it's a bent cylinder. So what do we have to do? Well, what we have to envision first is a bent cylinder, like so. How do we create a bent cylinder? Well, the easiest way to do that is to have two panels that already have that curve, and each one of these panels represents one half of that cylinder. The question is, how do we turn a one-piece sleeve into these two patterns? It's very simple. What we have to do first, if we have a pattern for this one-piece sleeve, is to bring these two seams right in the middle of the sleeve. That means that we have to fold them. When we do that, we create fold lines along these two green lines. Then we're going to tape these two seams together as to join them and make them one. And we're going to cut along these two green fold lines. When we do that, we create two panels. The green one is going to be the top sleeve, which covers the upper half of our circle, the armhole. And the second one is going to be the under sleeve, which covers the lower half of our circle, like so. If I would put these two panels together for clarity, what we are going to get is the following. That's our top sleeve. And of course, I'm simplifying this. This is our undersleeve. And if we bend the arm of these two panels, what we are going to get is the following. Like so. And like so. I'm going to call this top sleeve and I'm going to call this under sleeve. Okay? Now, whenever we join these two together, what we are going to have is our lovely tailored sleeve. Not so lovely maybe, but you understand. Like so. This is called a 50-50 sleeve, okay? Both of these seams on the front of the sleeve are called the forearm seams. Forearm seams. And both of the seams that we have on the back of the sleeve are called hind arm seams. What does a 50-50 sleeve mean? Well, it means that the undersleeve is the same size as the top sleeve. Whenever you put one of these made-up sleeves and you put them on a flat board and you flatten them, the forearm seams and the hind arm seams are going to become the crease lines. Let's have a look. So here we have top sleeve, undersleeve. When I put the undersleeve on the top sleeve, you can see they are exactly the same apart from the sleeve runs. And when we make it up, we get our 50-50 sleeve. When I flatten this 50-50 sleeve, the seams fall on where the crease lines would be. They become the creases of that sleeve. However, practically speaking, a 50-50 sleeve is wrong. Why? Well, because a 50-50 sleeve has the forearm and the hind arm seam aligned perfectly straight, so that when the sleeve goes into the armhole and it's hanging from the jacket, the arms are in this position that I have now. Nobody stands like this. Naturally, whenever we are relaxed, our arms are slightly rotated inwards. And whenever I bend my arms, you can see it bends towards my center front. It doesn't bend forwards like this in a straight line or outwards. Now, of course, I'm not saying people stand like this unless you're having a duel, but normally whenever we are relaxed, we have our elbows facing the sides slightly. So the question becomes, how do we turn our curved cylinder, our bent cylinder, into a cylinder that goes into the armhole and is slightly rotated inwards? The answer to that is in the position of the forearm and the hind arm seam. Where they fall on the armhole once the sleeve is locked in plays a very important role. So you might wonder, where should the hind arm and the forearm seam be on the armhole? So I want you to imagine the armhole being divided into 4 parts. Like so, and like so. First quarter, second quarter, third, fourth. The hind arm should be on the upper back quarter of the armhole, so that when it falls down, it is slightly visible from the side. Why? Well, the higher you go on the armhole, the more visible your hind arm is going to be from the side. Whenever it is visible from the side, it means that it is more on the side. Why is this important? Well, whenever this bent shape falls more on the side, it means that your elbow shape on your sleeve is also rotating to the side, which is what we want. On the other hand, we want the forearm seam to be positioned on the lower front quarter, so that when it falls down, it is hidden underneath and behind the forearm roll. Why? Well, again, the lower we go on the armhole, the more hidden our seam is going to be under our arm. And because we have this curvature on the forearm seam as well, and that curvature is really on the inner part of our arm, we want that seam to be more on the inside. So the combination of these two positions is going to create a sleeve that goes into the armhole and has a slightly inward rotation. Let's see how this looks on paper. Here we have three different sleeves. The middle one is our 50-50 sleeve, and when I place these two on top of one another, as you can see, they match, and the sleeve itself is pretty flat. Now, on the left side, what we have is a hind arm position that is high. So if I place this on my 50-50 sleeve, what you're going to notice is that the hind arm position begins a lot higher on the top sleeve run. So that means that the undersleeve becomes wider to wrap around to the front. Whenever we make this up, we get this sleeve. Now, if I try to flatten this, what you will notice is that the hind arm seam is visible and the elbow is slightly outwards. If I take these two and I hold them up and you look at them, you can see that the elbow of this one is slightly more to the side, whereas this one is perfectly straight aligned with the back. Now, on my right, I have another sleeve whereby the forearm seam is extended to fall on the inside of the armhole, on that lower front quarter. So if I place the 50-50 sleeve on top of this one, you will see that there is an extension. Now, that means that the undersleeve becomes slightly narrower, and so whenever we make these two sleeves up, we get a sleeve like this. As you can see, the seam is not visible on that front edge anymore. And when I rotate the sleeve and I flatten it, what you would notice is that the forearm seam falls on the inside. What we want is a combination of both of these two. And if we do that, we get this sleeve. The hind arm seam is slightly visible from the side, and the forearm seam is slightly hidden. When the sleeve goes into the armhole, we have the elbow facing outwards to some extent and the forearm seam inwards. Now that we know about the correct position of these two seams, let's talk about pitch. What is pitch? Pitch is one of those misused and ill-defined terms which creates a lot of confusion for beginners. Generally speaking, it means two things. Either pitch as a mark, pitch mark, which is the equivalent of a notch, or pitch as the hang of the garment in relation to the hang of the sleeve, okay? Let's begin with the first one. Whenever we want to set the sleeve into the armhole, because we are dealing with circular seams, we need to know where to start and where to end. We don't want to put the sleeve in like this. So what we do is we mark corresponding notches on the armhole so that we can match the forearm seam and the hind arm seam to those markings. For that reason, these two seams are sometimes referred to as front pitch or back pitch. But don't be confused, because we can also say front pitch or back pitch and refer to the armhole. So that's where this word again creates a lot of confusion. But if anyone says the front pitch is too high or low, or the back pitch is too high or low, you should always ask where, on the armhole or on the sleeve. So keep that in mind. Now, pitch marks, of course, are not just restricted to these two seams. We can have them anywhere as long as we have them correspond correctly together. So you can, for example, have a pitch mark on the top of the sleeve if you want to know where that seam should fall on the armhole right at the top, and you can match them a lot easier. Having said that, let's now go on to the other meaning of pitch, which is the relation of the garment to the hang of the arm itself. Normally speaking, when it comes to this part, people say the person has a high pitch or the person has a low pitch. When I tell you the person has a high pitch, what do you imagine? You probably imagine someone that stands like this. Nobody stands like this unless they are a clapping monkey with cymbals. Neither do people stand like this. All arms are hanging straight down, okay? That's very important to understand. If you ever move forwards with your shoulders or backwards, your armhole, your top of your arm and your arm will always move together and your arm is always going to hang down, okay? So do this exercise with me. Just hunch forward and then try to draw a straight line from the front of your armpit all the way down to the front edge of your wrist. What you'll notice is that they are more or less aligned, unless you have a broken arm or something. But generally speaking, all arms do this. Same thing as if you go to the back, draw a line, and you would see that they are aligned. We can conclude, because of that, that as long as the body of the jacket is fitted correctly and the horizontal chest line is parallel to the floor from all angles, you can take your forepart, like so, and here you have your chest line. You can take your forepart and draw a square line from the front of the armhole all the way down and be more or less 98% or something like that sure that this is the area where the front of the forearm seam at the wrist is going to hang, okay? Now, the reason why I'm telling you this and I'm emphasizing this is because I don't want you to think of pitch, someone's arm pitch, as a rotating mechanism, okay? We never just simply rotate the sleeve on the armhole to get the correct pitch. Tailors, however, unfortunately, do refer to that a lot. They would take a jacket in their hands and they say, it's pitching too high, can you just rotate the sleeve? That is not something that a tailor should do. That is a cutting thing. And let me tell you why you shouldn't do that as a tailor. If you have your armhole as the shape of an oval, which we have on our real jacket, and it's not a perfect circle, and your sleeve has to correspond to that, you would have these two shapes align, okay? Now, as soon as you start to rotate your sleeve, you are creating a mismatch between the shape of these two ovals. You're going to have too much here and not enough here. So that means that you have to reshape the sleeve run, reshape the run that we have here. That is a cutter's job, all right? So keeping that in mind, I want you to really focus on and understand what really affects pitch in the upcoming series. For now, we're just going to base the sleeves in because we have a correct pattern if you're following along based on the bundle that we have provided. But if you're working on your own project, I want you to keep those things in mind and don't just mindlessly rotate the sleeves without adjusting the runs. As for now, so far so good. Let's do a few exercises. The first exercise is very simple and yet extremely effective. We're going to pretend as if this is our sleeve and this is our armhole. This way, we can do this exercise without having to deal with all the other components of the jacket and just focus on the ease distribution. Many people find the distribution of ease around the armhole one of the most daunting tasks there is in tailoring. To make your life easier, we have already provided you with these patterns and you can download them as a PDF and print them out. The link to that PDF is in the description of this video. If, however, you don't have a printer but you still want to do the exercise, and I recommend you do, there are measurements on the patterns and you can thereby replicate those patterns on your own paper. So, what is the exercise? I want you to cut this square out from fabric 3 times. Once you've done that, I want you to mark these notches, these balance marks, these pitch marks, let's say, and you can do that by either mark stitching or making a very small snip right on that edge of each line. Next, I want you to cut out each circle once, and then I want you to do the same thing in regards to the notches. So transfer them either with a mark stitch or a small snip. Then I want you to take your sleeve, let's say, match it right side to any of the notches and then pin around as you go from notch to notch. Then baste all around with a 3/8 or 1 centimeter seam and distribute the surplus as you match the edge of your sleeve to the edge of the armhole. Now, the first circle, being the smallest one, is going to have some surplus, but it's not going to result in volume. And you've already seen how that looks, but maybe you don't know how it feels to put one of these actually in that armhole. Whenever you sew this one, because there is no excess width, There is no surplus, no overlap, nothing. It's just flat. The larger circle, however, is going to be a little bit bigger. And so it's also going to have a little bit more surplus. Once you sew that one in, you're going to end up with the other example that I showed you, and that's this one. There is now some volume. If we press this flat, there's going to be the overlap on the edge of our sleeve. Once you've sewn the second one, what I want you to do is to turn it to the other side and then flip it inside out, like so. You can place this on the edge of your sleeve board or on the edge, the corner edge of your board. Make sure that you don't have any creases or pleats right underneath here. But when you place that on your sleeve board edge or on your board edge, you can actually compress with the iron these surpluses flat. That will give a smoother volume on your panel. Now, I haven't done the biggest circle, but if you're doing this exercise, you will. And I want you to experience that bigger circle. It's going to be very difficult and challenging because there's going to be so much surplus to distribute evenly between all these notches, but also a lot to compress. Now, when all three are done, I want you to lay them next to one another and really evaluate the looks of them. Which one has more volume? How is the volume? Is it smooth? Is it flat? Can you do it better? And I want you to remember how difficult each one was to put together. This exercise is going to help you immensely if you've never put in any sleeves. So once you've done the exercise, please share it on the community page of our website because I'd like to see the results that you get. Different fabrics will behave differently, and on some fabrics it would be a lot easier to, for example, compress all of this surplus away, and on other fabrics it's going to be impossible on all three circles. Go for it. The second exercise is also very simple to do and yet extremely effective. We have 4 different sleeve patterns and a simplified body prepared for you as a PDF. You can download that PDF again in the description of the video. If you don't have a printer, what you can do is you can put your white paper against the screen of your laptop or computer, and you can trace these patterns so that you can still follow along. And I do recommend that you do this exercise. So what is the exercise? Well, we have 4 different sleeves and we begin with a 50-50 sleeve. I want you to cut these sleeves out and put them together with cellar tape. It's very simple. You put the forearm seams together, tape them, hind arm seams, and once you've done that, you should have 4 different sleeve shapes. What are the differences? You are going to find out. But just to instruct you and give you the confidence that you've done it correctly, I will tell you what they should look like. So the next example is a sleeve whereby the forearm seam is extended to roll inwards. The hind arm seam is untouched. The third sleeve is a sleeve whereby the hind arm seam is displaced towards the side, outwards, and the forearm seam is left untouched. The fourth sleeve is a combination of both these two, and to really see the effect of it, you would have to make a slight crease along the crease lines provided on the pattern so that you can really understand exactly what the orientation is of that sleeve. Now, once you've made them up, what do? You take the simplified body, which you also have to make up, and I want you to put the sleeves against this body, like so that the entire sleeve run is sitting flat against it. Then I want you to look at the sleeves from the back, the front, and the side to really gain a good understanding of the hang of the sleeve while having the seams on a different position. You can't see this very easily on a real jacket because fabric is soft and it just hangs down. But because of the rigidity that paper has, it really shows you exactly where the shape is put because of those seam positions. Good luck. Sleeves are complex. There is simply too much going on. If we have to cram all the world knowledge of sleeves into one lesson, you are going to be dizzy. So what we are doing is simplifying every relevant part so that you can apply the knowledge onto whatever it is that we are making. As for now, all we have to think about is a sleeve as a big circle that is compressed into a smaller one, the armhole. Please don't take the exercises for granted. I know they are simple, but if you do them, you will build up references in your mind, which is worth 100 years of tailoring knowledge. If this video brought value to you and you'd like to help us in return, you can do that with a small donation. You can go to the donations page of our website. There you will have all the instructions that you need, and you can find the link to that page in the description of this video. Make sure you're ready for the next lesson, because then we're going to put the sleeves into our jacket. My name is Reza. This was today's lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. But rest assured, we're going to... Shit.